Picking up from last time, in the indented material, which as we know is Dendal Haramba speaking, and to make a joke, he must have put down his pipe, and because, as you'll remember, he smokes a pipe. And as Geshe Wangyal conveyed to us students, he would hang his pipe on a shaft of light which stood out because there was smoke in the room from his pipe. So he would hang his pipe on the shaft of smoke from his pipe, which indicated his yogic achievement. But why he had to smoke a pipe if he was so yogically advanced was left for us to figure out. So this is Dendal Haramba speaking. So first he sets out how an inference, which Jeffrey every now and then makes sure you know that an inference is a consciousness. And sometimes Jeffrey translates the word inference as inferential consciousness. So how an inferential consciousness, how an inference is generated in the autonomy school and so forth. So what does and so forth mean? It should mean all of the lesser schools. So at least the Sutra school in Sutra school following reasoning. So of the two Sutra schools, at least the Sutra school following reasoning. So that means maybe not the Sutra school following scripture, and both mind-only schools. I guess I'm not any smarter by putting on this shawl. I can say I didn't get a chance to take even a 5-minute nap this morning, despite getting up at my usual time.
But are you more Nyingma? Are you more Nyingma?
No, please. I don't mean to intend that. I'd have to get up to the level of Mipam, and I can never do that. So, so what I don't know enough to, among the many branches of the so-called Vibhashika school, which is just a overall name for at least 18 schools. And so, you know, even if we boil it down to within the two types of schools following Vasubandhu, that included within the so-called Vibhashika, the Great Exposition School, and then the Sutra school following scripture, that following Vasubandhu's own commentary on his root text, would there be a different procedure or not? Anyway, that's my hesitancy here, and I don't know enough. So anyway, in the Dignaga Dharmakirti traditions utilized by these schools. Now the full process of, shall we say, extreme debate, as laid out by Ginnan Lotra from Gomang, and who tutored me over my, I forget how many months or weeks in Hamburg on my way to India. Is it 2 months or 3 months or 6 weeks? A fantastic scholar. Number one in his number one first class geisha while still in Tibet before coming out to India. And if I would hope to have time to listen to his teaching and put more Tibetan in this presentation, especially because I get lost when it comes down to 2A and how these sub-numbers figure in here. And I may want to ask you for your opinion on how these sub-letters figure in. But in any case, there's a lot that, well, I made a joke to myself. I went to Harvard and got a degree from Harvard, but I might be able to say I went through Princeton because I toured the campus and went in one side and came out the other. And some people do say such things. I went through Princeton. And in that case, I went through many universities. And I'm relaying something that somebody else taught me without my having gone through the traditional, Dignaga Dharmakirti studies, that never mind somebody like Gindan Lotra went through, but that anyone with a competent background went through. But because I recorded what Gindan Lotra taught me, and I'm relaying something for which I don't have as much background, even as much background as I have on some other topics for which I don't claim, that much background. So I'm treading on thin ice. So statement of a consequence here, among the 5 types of consequences, this is a consequence implying a proof of the opposite. And about the 5 types of consequences, I've talked about them in a couple of places, one of them being in Meditation on Emptiness. And you can look in the table of contents and look up the 5 types. And this is one of the 5. In other words, you can turn this around and put the opposite of the reason in the as the predicate of the proposition. Where it says is not a dependent arising, you can put into being truly existent, not being truly existent. So the opposite of the reason. And the opposite of not a dependent arising because of being a dependent arising. So it follows that the subject, a sprout, is not truly existent because of being a dependent arising. The opposite of the reason, okay, you can turn it around.
No. That's not right.
That isn't right, Venerable, but this is the point. They're trying to blow the person's mind apart a little bit. By
Correct. Here you're blowing the person's, you're breaking down the, when you meet somebody who's got a strong view, right? If you've in the teachings of Lorik, of awareness and knowledge, excuse me for using Tibetan first, of awareness and knowledge, you learn that in the psychological processes, you begin with a wrong view. And you're seeking to break that down. Break down the pointedness, or the, pointedness sounds like it's a little point. Whereas like a person comes at you, it's like with a battering ram. They've got it's like, in an old fort, there's this very powerful door, and you've got a very powerful door there, and somebody's got to come at it with a battering ram, and this is the battering ram. Follows that the subject, a sprout, or my body, is not a dependent arising. And if you're a Buddhist, no matter how one wants to raise the flag for being a consequentialist, because you've heard, that's a great system, I'm a consequentialist, forget it, you're not a consequentialist. Because of being, findable under analysis, because of being held so dearly in the center of your heart as the thing you're going to hold on to no matter what happens. Because of being existent from its own side. Of course it's existent from its own side. Look at my beautiful hair. I gave myself a haircut the other day. You'd never know it. Beautiful haircut. How beautiful I look. I don't even call it handsome. It's beyond handsome to beautifully handsome.
Like Rudy Giuliani.
All you have to do is turn aside, and then sometimes you say, "Oh, what's that? I thought he got a haircut." It's not a dependent. What do you mean it's not a dependent arising? My body's not a dependent arising. That's the Buddha's focal teaching. I'm a Buddhist. So you're still the double, those not double doors are usually nowadays made of glass and so forth. What do you call those huge doors?
Stores.
Your battering ram is a toothpick. So, breaking down the pointedness, and this is right in the text. This is not just Ngan making up something, pointedness or vibrancy. The text relay that this word tse or zel is written in two different ways. But pointedness, there's Joe Scarborough was saying, the Trump supporters are in his own family, and he said he just can't understand it. They're in his own family, and Trump himself says that Joe Scarborough is a murderer. And yet, they're holding on to Trump. This person who's calling him a murderer.
Yeah.
So he can't even break through their, Zay. The word Zay means, the top of a mountain. The top point, the word, the image doesn't convey the strength. The tip of a rocket, you don't think is weak. It's got a hydrogen, 5 hydrogen bombs inside it. There's, vibrancy. This is also the same. Cell is the same word in Nyingma. Oh, maybe that's why I have this on. The cell is blamed for the cell of how do we translate Rigpa? How do I translate first?
Intrinsic awareness.
Intrinsic awareness. Intrinsic awareness is it. It's basic reality. It's the basic constituent. And the mess of cyclic existence is blamed on its zel. It's, but also it's not all bad. Out of its zel, all of the marvels of the development of, the good things is going to come out of that. But somehow its vibrancy gets blamed. Same word. It's good to know how the word is used. What's going through my mind is that there's some word where I can't find any common usage of it. Often these big words on which so much rests have common meanings. Of the opponent's adherence to a wrong view. Emotionally charged. Not as so many people want to reduce wrong views to, superficially cold, easily like as if philosophy or intellectual were merely on some. And then I paused on the word easily because if you're a person in Nyingma of unusual capacity, sudden enlightenment, or what was the other word? Simultaneous enlightenment, called simultaneous Chikchawa in Tibetan, because the levels of the path are traversed simultaneously. Not click, 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 but click. Simultaneously doesn't mean click, 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 but click. So, in other words, when I said easily, I meant it. But then there's another type of easy path. Another meaning of the word easily, which is not like that, but it's like that. Or, it's very interesting, as Kizun Sambo said, you sit down with the Lama, and when you get up, you're at path of seeing, or you're at Buddhahood. So there was a bit of time lapse between sitting down and getting up. So maybe it did take a little time. Through having demonstrated inner contradictions in his or her own system, her or his own system, namely that the person's body exists from its own side, that the body has been arising, and that whatever has been arising exists from its own side, that there's a contradiction in there. You see that there's a contradiction. The opponent becomes doubtful. There's a little doubt creeps in. Now remember, there's 3 types of doubt. It's not, it probably doesn't. Does. There probably isn't a contradiction. You see? There probably isn't a contradiction. Is doubt. Doubt's crept in. My bank probably is solvent. Wow, that's, the first doubts you have as Geshe Rabten put it, the first doubts you have in an old friend. Wow, it's shattering in itself. First doubts in an old friend. Even though you're thinking these two probably don't contradict, because if these two elements were contradictory, how could you have to been an arising, right? Mm-hmm. If these causes didn't have some substance, then there'd be nothing. As in which so many people think the consequent school is. There's nothing. I'd have to even give up all these gurus or as the Hindu teacher who invited me to come to his temple, he wanted to debate me. As he said, so thoroughly without compassion, we'll just watch these people burn. These ignorant people burn. You can see why. It's, if you don't have wisdom, then and I could see what he was saying. The opponent becomes doubtful. Okay. This repairs the appointment for the statement of the reasoning. Once there's some doubt, and then it would go to equal doubt. Probably it is, probably it isn't. Probably there is contradiction, probably there isn't contradiction. Of the reasoning proving a sprout is empty of inherent, that's doubt tending to the fact, right? Now, which level of doubt would you have to have? Doubt tending to the wrong side, equal doubt, or doubt tending to the right side? At what point is it appropriate to state the reasoning? I don't know. See, this is where what's the line? What would Genenlotra say? I don't know. Might even say it below here. I read through it all again. Probably the third or fourth time that I've prepared this section. Now, we have an overall, number 2 is an overall heading for A and B. I get some confusion between I don't know, maybe it looks obvious to me what the difference between A and B is. Is it C? Yeah, the difference between A and B and number 3. Genenlotra's, what he was teaching was lucid. I don't have any question about what's written on the page here. That's what he said. And so, statement of the reason is established present reason in the subject, the entailment and the counter-entailment. So, as we've been saying over the last several times, what comes first? That my body is dependent arising, or whatever is dependent arising is empty of inherent existence. So here, it's my body is dependent arising. Because of being produced from causes and conditions such as a seed well, substitute if it's my body. A seed would be the father's seed and the mother's egg, if we bring it up to date. What do Tibetans say? What is the old-fashioned Buddhist view?
Blood.
Blood, right. And so womb. Womb and the materials in the womb. Nothing wrong with that. And the sustenance, if we keep it in the old-fashioned way, and the sustenance and so forth that comes from the mother. No problem with that old-fashioned way. And we can add on the, what's it called? Ovum, egg. Ovum is just a Latinized version of egg, right? Since the doctors, like any word except common English, rebellion against Anglo-Saxon words, easy Anglo-Saxon words, which are either one syllable or two syllables. Somebody's joined us with our laughter. Even though the tremendous amount of our words that we use day by day, and probably even in academic circumstances, are still Anglo-Saxon. As I've said many times earlier, the word for a skeleton in Anglo-Saxon is bone house. Ban hus. Ban hus. Bone house. Why not say bone house? Skeleton. One less syllable. Bone house. That person's got a really nice ban hus. Bone house. Right?
No, that's not right.
A banhus. A really cool word. Well, we say bone structure, right? Also. Maybe it's a little clearer. Bone house, the house you might think would include the flesh. So the subject is, but to reflect, there are a lot of debates which are found in the reflections on ugliness, which are so very helpful. The reflections on ugliness, which are so very helpful. Where you reflect on the number of tears that I have shed. You wouldn't reflect on the tears I've shed, but reflection on the tears you've shed. Is it buckets? Is it bathtubs full? In this life, buckets. And over the course of lifetimes, of course, a pond. My neighbors built a lake for me. They're really volunteered. A very interesting relationship I have with my neighbors. One neighbor said, maybe I mentioned something. Anyway. certain over how many lifetimes would it take to fill my pond? Quite a number. But, if you think of this lifetime, bathtub full. If you think of, really, it's to reflect on this type of stuff, on how much crap you've crapped. That's a lot. If you think a bathtub full, give me a break. A dump truck full? Maybe. Certainly. That's not enough. And kind of look at it, Get it in front of you and look at it. How much snot have you snotted? Is that the word? I snotted a lot. And even what do you call this stuff? This stuff in the corner of your eyes? You dig out in the morning. Quite a bit. Might be, in this lifetime, that'd be really difficult to fill a bathtub, wouldn't it? But a sink full or a bowl full? What would be the size of the bowl? Not just a cereal bowl, right? My cereal bowl were pretty big. It's all we eat in the morning. These are meditations that are prescribed for Buddhists. If we're Buddhists, we're supposed to be doing these. Earwax. Urine. Oh, that's quite a bit. and put them in front of you and contemplate them. And skeletons means skeletons over, I don't know how many lifetimes, but quite a bit. I mean, if you think of all of your lifetimes, I mean, it's a huge, the mountain's so big, the Himalayas won't encompass it. But you got to imagine a certain amount, otherwise you give up. And you use words like incredible. Well, what incredible means anymore? As I've said, I translate every incredible that I hear. Galaxies of, these. But anyway, if you say 1,000 skeletons, okay. So it's a little bit difficult to bring dependent arisings, and that's why I say take it back to the what do they call it? Zygote, whatever that means. The semen and egg that has been penetrated by consciousness in the womb of your mother. And I've got some sort of image of my mother and me. She's outside under the linden tree. Was the linden planted by that time? Okay, I'll pretend it's, some tree. And she's sitting there with a cocktail in her hand because that generation of parent in her class loved to have a cocktail. And she's out under the tree. No, whatever. Blah, blah, blah. Maybe she's in the house or something, whatever, having a cocktail. And I'm there. And then take it up through, the pregnancy and so forth. And then I have very clear memories of, myself being, and being nurtured. And actually I remember, so don't want to go into too much detail, but sucking on her tit. And then she took me off on the bottle, and this is sustenance. It's like earth and water. And sitting in the kitchen, eating food, and being brought to the table and eating, and, right? And thus I can be sitting here today. And it just bringing to mind these things caused the image right now of my breakfast and eating it to appear to my mind. And so this body, I'd be racked with the pain of hunger if I couldn't have eaten that now. And if these don't vividly appear to the mind, dependent arising won't make sense. It'll be words. So, a very interesting, the point is made in this paragraph that eventually the reasoning meets back to obvious experience. If a person doesn't have that obvious experience, you just have to stop. And a clever, smart, adept teacher will help the person. You're, in my case, Geshe Wangyal has us build, or, at least double the size of the monastery. And so if you want to build it, you've got to buy lumber, causes. You got to buy nails. You got to do this, you got to do that. And so causation makes sense, and you gain some obvious experience, for instance. One thing leads, you gain an experience that one thing leads to another. And maybe that helps. And when 2 and 2 equals 4 comes together, maybe the next step will work. So as His Holiness says in Key to the Middle Way, he quotes Dharmakirti's statement that all reasoning meets back to obvious experience. And that if it didn't, the reasoning that establishes the presence of the reason in the subject would be endless. There's no way it could proceed. And if the person doesn't have that, I'm just repeating what's on the page, that obvious experience, you must stop. As one of my friends that we lived with at the first Tibet house in America in Wisconsin, out in the country, Cambridge, Wisconsin, said, it could just be happenstance that something occurred after the so-called first event. In other words, that the second event followed the first event. It could just be a happenstance. Confirming that second event follows the first event, you can never confirm that that effect follows the cause. So, he's lost. So, how do you confirm it? You know, that it happens enough times. And, you know, he'd probably say, well, you've had enough dreams where the second one follows the first. So you say, I'm introducing doubt into you. You have to have these common experiences, these obvious experiences. Otherwise, it doesn't work. That such and such quenches your thirst. It, you know, you can get locked into quandaries. Okay. Last line, other indirect means are required to bring the person to the point of recognizing the obvious dependence of a sprout on causes and conditions. So, I don't like this sprout thing, as I wanted to say, we go to the market and we buy sprouts. And when you buy sprouts, you'll notice that the seed is still hanging on to the sprout. So sprout and seed are simultaneous. You see, I have a problem with that. Therefore, I want to say stalk. The corn stalk and the corn seed don't exist at the same time. So I've changed the teaching. So, statement of the reasoning. So we might stop here.
Jeffrey, may I ask a question?
Yes, please.
This is, I think, a really perhaps big question, or could get big maybe, but you're talking about having the reasoning have to fall back eventually at the common experience.
Yes.
But it seems like those common experiences still could be interpreted in so many different ways. So you could have many people with this experience seeing a sprout arising from causes, but then you still have, because of the power of different beliefs, some people who think, oh, it actually was created by God, or some people who believe, oh, it actually had the cause within,
Yes.
Result within the cause, and so forth. So you still, like, how do you actually come to realize the property of the subject, the property of the reason in the subject? Because don't you have to reflect on it in a certain way for it to click that was the experience, the obvious experience I really had, and I get it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Number one, there may be a difference between common meaning shared, and common meaning obvious. Number one. Number two, then reading refutations of Sankhya, the Sankhya position, and gaining affirmation of the Buddhist position, seeing if that works. Or I'm an advocate of playing with a position and seeing where it goes. And then also seeing if the advantages of the Sankhya position are somehow attempted to be retained in the Buddhist position, and how they're attempted to be retained in a modified way. And to beware of the Buddhists using, and therefore to beware of Buddhists using laughter, derision against any so-called opponent. As one Sarache, a white person, indicated, I shouldn't have said what college the person was from, indicated to me an attitude of considering all other Gelugpa college positions on emptiness and the consequent school to be pathetic. And I just remained silent. Because I didn't want to get into, some, almost as if, well, they're all non-Buddhists, or they're so beclouded that they're outside the realm of even Tsongkhapa's teachings. Never mind, although it would be interesting to go down that track if by my answers I didn't incite something even worse, But certainly Gomang would do the very, I don't, see I'm dumping thereby on white Sarache, but I would do the same thing with white, red, blue, green, yellow, brown, black, whatever, and any sort of naive, I do the same thing with everybody. But in my own outlook, I enjoy playing with it all. Because I find that whatever position is being put down eventually pops its head back up in what I would call our own system. So I want to beware. And also, it's like saying, until we can prove rebirth with reasoning, don't believe it. Well, it's ridiculous. I find. I mean, Don McCurdy did work at proving rebirth with reasoning. But I prefer to use, but here I'm giving a preference. And one could answer back, well, your preference is silly. And I prefer to use His Holiness' statement at Harvard to this huge audience of, it's at least 1,400 people. When I used the word proof, he corrected me, which was drupje, for the Tibetan word drupje, which is a perfectly good translation. He said food for thought. And yeah, food for thought. And I didn't subsequently use food for thought in my translation of drupje. I used proof, because I can't warp the text that way. But in my own practice, yes, this is powerful food for thought, and provocative, and I've spoken about this before in Zen, that the nature of the mind is clear light. There's a lot of meditation in which one is believing in that the nature of the mind is clear light, and to separate my meditation from pretending or believing that the nature of the mind is clear light is, I feel, idiotic. To wait for establishment by valid cognition that the nature of the mind is clear light, I feel in my own practice that it would be idiotic. I prefer to believe it and pretend it. And as I'm going to sleep at night, believe it and look for it and look for and look for the clear, look for the clear light in hopes of experiencing it during sleep. Nice play, if it works. So, without becoming a rabid proponent of such. Anyway, so thanks for the question, for giving me a chance to rapidly propound my own view. No, I'm not rapidly propounding it. Please don't anybody go crazy rapidly following Jeffrey Hopkins' own view. I can't come and help you. You'll be on your own. Develop your own flexibility. I do somewhat rapidly propound that. And how do you get so you're flexible? Engage in the various practices of the stages of the path. We need this armor. That's what armor is. Okay, I look forward to seeing you next week.